I work at a Montessori school, which has small classrooms of 3 to 4 children each. The classrooms are on the lower level of a church, and my responsibility is to clean them. Every night after classes, it would only take me about 2 hours to clean all of the rooms, but I also worked the closing shift at a nearby grocery store, so I wouldn't arrive at school until around 10:30 p.m. most nights. You should also know that the church shared a parking lot with an elderly care facility directly across from it. I'll admit that a lot of strange and creepy things have happened at this school, but the weirdest had to be what happened a few weeks ago. I had just finished cleaning the second room and was preparing to move all of my cleaning supplies to the third room. It was probably around 11:45 at this point, which meant I was running a little late, so I was rushing. As I crossed the hallway to the third room, I could hear loud bells ringing throughout the church upstairs. Someone rang the doorbell. Nobody had ever shown up for any of my shifts before because it was always so late, and both the school and the church had been closed hours before. I was a little nervous, so I moved slowly up the stairs and towards the door. It was one of those wooden doors with large, tinted glass windows. Trying not to be noticed, I checked around the corner to see who was outside. I noticed an elderly woman, probably in her 70s or 80s, standing just outside the door. I backed away before she could see me. I decided to ignore it, assuming she had wandered off and that one of the attendants at the old people's home would pick her up. I started cleaning again, this time mopping the room's floors. But only a few minutes later I heard banging in the halls. I jumped a little then. Then I stopped listening. The banging paused for a few seconds, followed by the old lady yelling from outside. It was difficult to understand what she was saying, so I went back upstairs where I could clearly hear what she was asking for. She was looking for someone named Abby. She kept repeating her name. As I approached the door, the woman paused. I looked around the corner, and she was no longer outside the door. It was a little unsettling, but I reminded myself that someone had probably come to get her after hearing her yell. I turned around and started making my way back out of the corner of my eye. I see the old lady staring at me through the window next to the stairs. She looked me in the eyes and yelled, "Abby, help me." Her eyes were wide open, and her hair was long and gray. I ran back downstairs and locked myself in one of the classrooms. I took out my phone and called the elderly couple next door, explaining the situation and wondering if she had wandered away from them. The lady on the line informed me that everyone was present, and they would have noticed if anyone had left because they were required to check out. She stated that she would double-check with security and remain on the line just in case. While I was waiting, I heard a banging on the upstairs window, and a few seconds later, the woman on the phone described the old lady's features and asked if it was her. I said yes and mentioned that she is constantly yelling for someone named. There was a brief moment of silence, ma'am. I spoke softly back into the phone and she warned me not to approach her and to find a safe place to stay until someone could come and get her. Obviously, this only made me more terrified. I remained in the room, listening to the repeated banging on the window upstairs. Now, this was an old building, and I wasn't sure how long those windows would last if she kept banging on them. I eventually heard male voices outside, and after what sounded like a struggle, they left. I sat there for a few minutes, just reflecting on what had happened. Then I got up to finish cleaning the rooms. The entire situation felt surreal, and the fact that the old lady is in the building across from me still makes me nervous. I never found out who Abby was or why the lady tried to enter the church, but I'm glad I didn't open the door. At the gas station. It was situated on a road that was primarily used by locals to travel in and out of state without having to deal with highway congestion. There was nothing else along this route. It was just a road with a single gas station for the occasional driver to stop at. That's why it was ideal for me the location didn't matter. Because I lived in a van, I could easily stay out there for extended periods of time while working. Anyway, I'd been there for a little more than a month and I was still working random shifts. Today I worked from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. It wasn't a particularly special night. There were no customers aside from a few pump stops, and there wasn't much to do in terms of stocking or anything else. I was mostly standing around on my phone or pacing around the store, making sure the shelves looked good. Then, at 1 a.m., a customer drove into the station and parked in one of the few spaces directly in front of the door. I returned to the counter, knowing they were on their way in. A man got out and entered the shop, looking over and smiling at me before nodding as he turned down one of the aisles. He began whistling as he examined a few items, picking them up and returning them before moving down the aisle and repeating the process. I wasn't sure if he was just taking a break from driving or if he needed something, but the items he was picking up and looking at were all different, and he didn't appear to be interested in purchasing them. Then he abruptly stopped whistling, walked over to the door, and departed. I didn't think he stole anything, but it seemed strange. He got into his car and began moving around, reaching into the back seat before exiting and returning to the shop. After realizing I wasn't feeling very comfortable, this seemed almost exactly how I imagined an armed robbery would begin, but the aggression I expected when he returned didn't materialize. He approached the counter and inquired about how my night had begun, a quick exchange of small talk. I tried to act normally, just in case I was overthinking things, but then he asked if I could help. He has his car. He stated that his tires needed air and that he did not see any pumps outside. There were no self-service air pumps available at this station. However, we did have a handheld air compressor for emergency situations. I pulled it out and followed him to his car. He pointed down to the tire that needed it, and I dove in, inserting the compressor line. I walked in for less than 10 seconds before the pressure was detected to be at the appropriate level. I looked over and saw the man looking down at me with no expression. I took everything out, stood up, and began walking back to the shop. When he stopped me by rushing in front of the door, his right hand was deep inside his jacket pocket, and he stared at me with a cold expression. I told him to move, but he remained in front of the door, indicating that he was about to do something. I took a step back, trying to say something to defuse the situation, but just as I thought he was about to snap, he ran around me and got into his car, pulling out aggressively and speeding away. I took this opportunity to go inside and call 911, and they arrived surprisingly quickly. I arrived only minutes later. They were already on the chase, looking for the exact vehicle the man drove. The officer stated that the man was on the run from a recent crime near the border. They didn't give me any details, but the way they said it made me believe it wasn't a minor robbery. They resumed their journey after my brief statement, and I received no further updates. I tried looking up recent crimes and other information, but I couldn't find anything useful. I'm not sure what he was up to or why he stopped at the station, but my best guess was that he was going to steal my van and cover his tracks, or at least delay them. However, depending on the crime he had just committed, I believe my life could have been in danger, which is why he chose. It is unknown what will happen if nothing is done to me. I spend a lot of my free time doing deliveries for DoorDash. It's my way of earning extra money without having to commit to a more demanding second job. I began driving around 9 p.m. on this night and continued to take orders until 11 p.m. when things slowed down slightly. During this time, I simply drove around the shopping center, which housed the majority of the fast food restaurants that people frequently ordered from, until another order arrived. It was a regular order that would be delivered about 4 miles away. After getting the food, I began following the directions to the address, and it was almost immediately clear that it was not a home. I scrolled in on the map, which only showed streets and buildings, and the address was assigned to a street with no buildings. It looked like an empty plot of land, but the DoorDash map was never very good, so I just started driving and decided to check it out and possibly call the customer if there was a problem. This street was bare, there were no houses or crossroads, and no cars were driving down it. When I reached the end, the road turned to gravel, and there was a small wooden sign on the side that was too weathered to read. I pulled onto the gravel and turned on my headlights, and I immediately noticed something far down the road. I drove closer, and my phone alerted me that I had arrived. In my headlights was a small mobile home or RV, with poorly painted numbers on the door. I turned back to my phone 2760. This was the address. I stepped out, holding the food in my hand as I approached the RV, and getting closer. It was slightly unsettling to look at. It was overgrown and old, which was unusual for a mobile home designed to be moved around. I gave it a knock and waited. This was a rare cash order, which made sense once I saw the location, but having this stand here did not make me happy. As I looked around, an unsettling feeling came over me. This location was surrounded by woods with no lights anywhere. Beyond the RV, there was complete darkness. I heard something from inside and was expecting them to open the door, but then a voice to my right startled me. I looked over and saw a man smiling at me from the corner of the RV. He asked if I had his order, and I nodded, apologized, and walked it over to him. I handed it off and calculated the total. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5.00 bill before smiling again and saying he only needed to grab the rest. He turned and walked back around the RV while I remained where I was. This entire interaction in writing no longer appears as strange as it once did, but I can tell you there was something seriously wrong with this guy. There was something about the way he acted and said things that gave me chills. I waited for about a minute before becoming nervous and looking around the corner to see where he had gone. In the distance, I saw a figure standing near what appeared to be the dark outline of a shed. They weren't walking. They just stood there. As the fear grew inside me, my head jolted around when I heard the RV door open. A different man looked at me, and as I began to greet him, he slammed the door shut. My heart rate is now increasing. I looked back at the man standing by the shed. He was walking back toward the RV, but he was holding something else. I couldn't tell whether it was a long bat or a rifle. I dashed back to the car, getting in and starting it with shaky hands while shifting into reverse. As I drove away, the man emerged from the side of the mobile home and stood calmly in the darkness. I'm not sure what happened there, but I wasn't interested in finding out. I went straight home and debated calling 911, but I was preoccupied with the fact that I had no idea what was going on. In the end, I regretted not notifying the police. Whatever happened that night will remain as a strange encounter, with no answers as to its true nature.